welcome to Launch, the GCC podcast. I'm your host, Marty Duren, Director of Communications for the Great Commission Collective. We're a global network of churches partnering together to plant churches and strengthen leaders. My guest today on Launch is Bill Foss. Many of you will recognize his name. He's the pastor of Harvest Church near Portland, Maine, actually in Westbrook, just west of Portland. He has the distinction of pastoring a GCC church that is pretty remote compared to the rest of the churches, the GCC churches in America. And so we're going to be talking to Bill today about bivocational ministry, something that he knows well as what it's like to pastor in an area that is so far away from what we typically think of as the Bible Belt and places that are loaded with churches. So looking forward to this conversation today with Bill Foss. Well, thanks again for joining, everyone. I'm live today. Well, it won't be live when you hear it, but I am live, and Bill Foss is also live. He's up in Westbrook, Maine, which is just west of Portland. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Excellent. So, Bill, you are pastor at Harvest Church in Westbrook, and I know a lot of our guys know you, and you know a lot of our guys. But we do have some new guys in the network, and because you're like, I think you may be the most remotely located GCC church in America, in the American group.
In America, except for the guys out in Calgary,
right? And you're also bivocational. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself? You can go in any direction with this that you want to.
Well, guys, again, my name is Bill Foss. I'm what I would call myself is a bivocational pastor of probably what we call an average church in the United States, with just under 100 people here in Westbrook. I've been bivocational for, ever since I graduated from Bible college as a second career pastor in '96. Now, there's been a few years here and there that I haven't been bivocational, but like I said, most of the time it has been working a couple of jobs and pastoring the church. Church is going well. We've been here. I've been pastor of this particular church for 24 years.
Wow.
And it's been a while. I'm in my mid 50s and waiting for my last child to be done college and head her way. And so it's an interesting life that we live up here in the Northeast.
Now, you guys are you guys called Mainers? Is that the word? Yeah,
Mainers. Some other people call us maniacs, but that's a different story. We are our own different breed up here. If you think of Massachusetts, it's not really who we are. We're a little bit more remote than Massachusetts, although the city that we live close to here in Portland is somewhat called Little Boston. It's a nice little city, but it's our biggest city in Maine, and it's only 65,000 people.
Oh wow, okay. So you're a native Mainer then? That's where you were born and grew up?
Yeah, I live in the hometown that I grew up in. We moved back about 5 years ago. We lived all over, but the area. But we settled back in my hometown about 5 years ago.
Excellent.
And it's different. It's you look around, it's not quite the same as it was when you were a kid, and it's okay. It's the next town over from where Westbrook is. It's actually the town of Wyndham.
Okay, excellent. So, talk a little bit about how you came to faith in Christ, because, I'm in the Bible Belt. A lot of guys are in the South, and we just think that there are no Christians in Maine, that you must be the only one. So how did you come to faith in Christ, and what is the kind of the spiritual dimension like in Maine?
Well, there's probably back when I was 7 or 8 years old. My little brother and I, 2 years younger than I am, we came out into the living room, and it was Easter Sunday, and we usually were expecting, the Easter Bunny stuff, but there was a couple of, dating myself here, leisure suits, and my brother and I walked into my parents' bedroom, and we said, "What is this?" And they told us that we were going to church that day, and that was different for us, different for my family, and we started going to a church here in Portland, the First Baptist Church, and probably about 6-7 months after we started going there, we used to go to the night service because it was a little bit more modern at that time, right? And the pastor was using the overhead projector.
Wow.
And he was drawing out the bridge illustration of the gospel. And I can remember just Thursday, and he asked if anybody wanted to get saved, and I raised my hand, and didn't realize it till, several years later that I was the first one in my family to accept the Lord. My parents were shortly after me, but it was me as the first one. And I wish I could say it was all a rosy trip after that, but grew up going to Christian schools and went to Bible college right out of high school, but dropped out of Bible college, and was a period of time that I call the dark years.
Mm-hmm.
And in the middle of that, the Lord called me back to himself, back to church, back to a good relationship with him. And shortly after that, met my wife. We got married, and a few years down the road, I said, honey, I was building houses and doing all that kind of stuff at that time too. I said, I think the Lord's calling me back to Bible college. So we packed up two of the kids, the two oldest kids, and we went to Bible college and had a construction company during the time I was there.
Wow.
And supported myself, get out of college by, swinging my hammer. And a lot of times I just traded projects on the school campus. One was a roof on a library, one of my semesters at school. So that's just how my life has been. Yeah. Right. What the strange part about me is, in that you said about the Christian climate in Maine. When I was a kid, there was lots of, the move towards non-denominational churches, and my folks went to an Assemblies of God church, and then our church that I'm actually pastoring now. My parents actually helped start this church. It was an independent church, and it was kind of, by the time I actually went to college, it was quite neutral, quite in very many ways. And so long story short, God brought me back here, a healthy church, all that project. But
that is really fascinating that you've been in your hometown for all the life except for where you went to Bible college, which required a move.
Yep.
Come back, return to the church where you were, and then become the pastor of the church at some point. All the while being bivocational.
Yep. All the time. Even my first couple of years here, my income was solid construction.
Mm-hmm.
The church actually paid a health insurance policy for us. And it's been up and down and all that. And, the idea of being bivocational in the state of Maine, it's either the pastor has to work his job and his wife has to work a pretty solid full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
Because the church is, again, not that large, but things are quite expensive in the state of Maine. Heating bills, I don't even know what our heating bill cost in the building that we're in right now. I know what it was in the building that we used to own. It was astronomical.
Wow.
Those kind of things, that you have the plowing expenses of the property, you have all those things you need to pay. So I've never wanted to strap the church financially,
mm-hmm.
and to be able to pay the bills, to be able to have all of that done, to be able to have money for other things has been good.
Mm-hmm.
But and so in all of that, it balanced all out in our world, and in my wife Melissa's and my family, is we chose that she would be home with the kids as they were growing up.
Mm-hmm.
The situation is that we had 2, and then we had 8.5 years, and then 2 more. So that time period has been a long time.
Yeah.
So that was a burden financially. And so, again, a lot of pastors have their wife works and they work, and we just chose it a different way.
Right.
A lot of times you need 2 incomes. So I provided the 2 incomes. She provided a lot of homeschooling and different things at different times. And that also freed her up to do a lot of things for church.
Talk a little bit about some of the challenges that a bivocational pastor would face, maybe in regards to time, in regards to being able to have that balance between family and church ministry and then your regular job situation. Because there'll be some guys that are listening who are considering bivocational, and then there's another term that's used sometimes called co-vocational.
Right.
They're going to be considering one of these options as they plant. Talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you've dealt with that you're like, hey, here's a couple of things you might want to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that we chose homeschooling, is because of the flexibilities. That, you know, if it happened to be, the other balance of my life is I'm self-employed carpenter. I don't work for somebody else. It's always been on my own, so I get to pick the days and the times and get up with the kids. I used to take the kids to school. There was even a period with the older two that I actually taught at the school they went to. It was a Christian school they went to. That was one of the ways I was bivocational, and I did snow plowing. And there's different ways that you can get around making sure that you have great family time. And that's always been a priority with us, and it still is with our kids now and our grandkids.
Yeah.
But to balance things out, you have to make sure that you choose your second career that is balancing, and you also have to always realize that the church is the first responsibility. And so a lot of times during my years is if there was a week that I had to put 3 or 4 days into a project, construction project, I would absolutely know it ahead of time and sermon prep beforehand. The other thing is I've pretty much always worked on my sermons on Saturday. And so, yes, you guys all here, you go to these conferences and the guys tell you that you have to do it this way and have to do it this way. No, you don't have to. We're all a little bit different. And our lives work a little bit differently. And so I work a lot better when I finish a sermon on Saturday instead of Friday. I know that's probably going to make some guys turn green. But,
oh man, I got you beat. I study all week long, but I don't finish until Sunday morning. I get up at like 3:00 and study and finish up for a couple of hours. And when I was pastoring full time, I would actually carry a thumb drive in that had all of the PowerPoint slides. So I did all the PowerPoint slides myself so that I could get them done at the very last second. And then I would take them in and they'd plug them into whatever ProPresenter or whatever they were using. So somebody else built the template and I just changed the words.
I finished Sunday morning, probably at 7:00 in the morning last Sunday. That's the kind of thing you have to do because, I guess a number of years ago, I developed my system of writing sermons. It doesn't take as long as what some guys would do. And so you have to create your way of doing things that allow for the time you need. And the concept of Sabbath, rest, and all those things, you can find rest. And this is how I tell people, you need to find rest like for your mind every hour, every day, every week, but it doesn't have to be that full day. I was telling my daughter the other day that some guys that work the 5 days a week, they still don't get Saturdays off.
Yeah,
they have to take care of the stuff around their house. They have to take care of this. They have to take care of that. Sabbath is a way. It's a frame of mind as well. And my wife and I we do sneak out a lot for a couple of days here and a couple of days there, and we get away from the house. We get away from everything. It's something we established a long time ago, and it's been fairly easy for us because we have the older kids that watch the younger kids. At that time, my parents would watch the kids, but we did a pretty good job of sneaking away for a couple of days to have that time as well.
Yeah. How is it with the expectation of the folks in your church on your time? So, in the Bible Belt, if you're in the office, then there's going to be a percentage of people in your church that feel like they can just drop by and stick their head in and talk about whatever for anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour and a half.
Well, that's going to be a problem anyways, right? So what the truth is it's about preparing the people too. The people know that I'm bivocational, and they know that I have another business, and in some ways that creates opportunities for relatability. And because lot of the people that are in your church, they're working their tails off, and to know that the pastor also does work his tail off, there's a lot of it's a cool little thing that happens there. I know that when you teach, you need to do your devotions. You need to get up and take time to do those. When I tell stories of how I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I do mine before this, and my wife and I get together and pray every morning. If I can do it, they can do it.
Yeah.
And
so you
has,
see that they can identify with
leg.
you a little bit better because you have that job just like they have a job as well.
Yeah, that's what we found. Again, and the guys know that I'm in the office at times, but they also the church knows if they want to talk to me, they all have my cell phone number.
Right.
They all have my email address, and they can call me at any time. We make sure that's available. Call me at any time. I do work for myself. I can answer my phone. And so it's a lot of guys. My kids joke with me sometimes about the two hats that I wear, but
right.
The thing is sometimes I have both hats on at the same time, and it's okay. It's really okay because I can have a phone call on the job site for a few minutes or for a half hour even, but then just go back to work.
Let me ask you this: as far as pastoring in Oregon, in Maine.
I knew you'd say that. No.
Yeah.
Here's trivia for you.
That's right. If I had used Wyndham, it would have been different.
But you know that Portland, Oregon, if you say that right, is actually named after Portland, Maine.
I did not. I mean, it makes sense, but I didn't know it.
Yeah.
Is that y'all's biggest claim to fame? Surely not. Surely not.
Because when you say Portland, everybody says
that's true.
Or no, it's Maine.
That's true. And I've actually been to Maine, and I still think Portland, Oregon. Talk a little bit about ministry in a remote area like that, where do you deal with a different type of cultural Christianity, or is there any kind of cultural Christianity that you have to work through to get people to hear the actual gospel? Is it more of a non-exposure to the gospel or anything like that? Explain a little bit about what it's like to minister to people and try to reach people in your context.
What we would call Maine, believe it or not, it's pretty much like the rest of New England. It's quite post-Christian.
Okay.
A lot of people have heard about Jesus. They've even heard the gospel. They're not much interested in it. It's a it's heavily Catholic up here because of the French Canadians that did come down here and settle. It's very, I would say, there was a social gospel movement with the Congregational churches and the Methodist churches at one time, and those churches tended, now that they're the Unitarian Universalist churches that are around, and so I think in what we would call the Jesus movement in the 60s, there was a real push into this area. And I think, the Calvary chapels and the real non-denominational movement did come into Maine during that time. And then you got the mainline Baptist churches, and they kind of struggled with each other there for a while. But, so here's how I say it. I grew up in this greater Portland area. I probably know somebody in every church in this area. I know somebody that because it's the same Christian community. The Christian community is okay size here, but it's the same size it's always been. And I don't know much about new growth, new salvations, and those things that are, you see it slowly, I think, up here. And it excites me when I see that there's a guy in our church in his 60s that actually accepted the Lord a couple of years ago, and he's just totally on fire.
That's awesome.
His sister and brother-in-law come to our church, and I've known of this guy for years, interacted with him for years, but I think things take longer up here. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
things may take longer up here because people just there's a cold attitude too in Maine and New England is welcome to Maine, now go home.
Yeah.
Is one of the,
is that y'all's marketing? Is that y'all's tourism slogan up there?
Well, that's what the real Mainers say. Yeah, we need your money, but welcome, hurry up, go home, will you? And it's, again, I don't think it's that different than any other place. Every place has its own culture. Every place has its own thing that we deal with, right? And so I'm a big, big believer in somebody from the area does the best ministry in the area. That's why we like the way that we plant churches in other countries and get a local that's there to do that. And I think the same idea works in Maine. We live probably in a region that's a little bit different here in southern Maine. But if you go to where my parents are from and where my grandparents were, it does get quite different.
Is that farther north?
Yeah, a little farther north.
Yeah.
It's a little more. Be careful who my cousins live up there. It's a little more country, put it that way.
Oh yeah, okay, all right.
Yeah. So the southern people have redneck, right? But there's also a Maine redneck as well.
Yeah, I think every state and every region has a version of redneck, and it's not right. That's not a slur. At least it shouldn't be, because it's just a way of relating to your community and thinking about where you live.
Yeah, I've been wearing jeans when I preached way before it was cool.
Yeah,
because it was a thing that I did. I remember going to Bible college, and we had to wear ties for our junior and senior year because we had to train ourselves for ministry. That's how old I am, right? And I can't remember the last time I put a tie on. I think for a wedding I did once.
Yeah.
That kind of thing happens. My closet's, I should probably say this, my closet's full of guns, and I hunt and those kind of things, because that's how I grew up, right?
Well, there's certainly nothing wrong with that. Bill Foss, Harvest Church in Westbrook, Maine. Is that right?
Yes.
All right, man. Well, I look forward to seeing you sometime. I don't think we've ever met face to face. If we have, it must have been right after I started, and I have no memory. But I want to hang out with you.
And you were confused. We were all confused, right?
Yes.
I get to some of these things that we've done, and it's like, okay, I know that guy, but I can't remember his name. I know that guy, and I can't remember his name. But yeah,
man.
And I just got an email from Nate Newell, and he's working with Mission Church now, and they're going to really push towards church planting in the East. And awesome. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Because it's not the Bible Belt up here anymore by any means.
Yeah.
It's just not. And, remember the Bible colleges that used to be up here and everything went liberal, Yale and, Harvard,
absolutely.
and all those kind of places. Right. And, the liberalness in Christianity it started here and moved west. And that's where we are. We're in that post-Christian, I don't need Jesus area. Until somebody hears the gospel and the Lord saves them. And that's incredible to watch.
Thank you for listening to Launch, the GCC podcast. If you haven't subscribed already, why not take a moment to do that in your favorite podcast app? Also, rate and review the podcast when you get a moment. That helps us with search results. And recommend us to your friends, maybe other pastors that you know who will benefit from the content from this podcast. Also, don't forget to check out our website if you haven't done that already. It's gccollective.org. That's gccollective.org. And there's a lot of helpful information. There's articles. There's how you can join the GCC, whether a church planter or an existing church, and plenty of other content that'll help you grow spiritually and encourage you in your leadership journey.